Hello and welcome. And today I am joined by Andrew McCauley, who is an S&C coach and physio. Andrew, thank you for joining. How are you doing?
Good, man. Yeah, looking forward to this.
Likewise. So I had the pleasure of meeting you at Therapy Expo recently, and I'm looking forward to finding out a bit more about your history. Although I did find out quite a little bit last time, but it's good to get it on camera, or most of it anyway. So whereabouts are you from originally? You've got a relatively distinctive accent.
Yeah, I'm from the west of Ireland, a place called Sligo. So northwest, kind of on the other side. Yeah, that's where I'm originally from, a place called Strandhill, which is right on the coast. So it's a very beautiful place. And I'm the youngest of 7 brothers and sisters. So effectively, I've got 3 brothers and 4 sisters. So effectively, I was raised by kind of wolves in some way, which and by saying that as well, it's kind of like I am we are a pack as well. We all get on really quite well, and it kind of ties in, I suppose, to the person I am and how the physio I am now. I suppose when coming from that, we might dive into that a bit. But yeah, that's where I'm from, and yeah, I've got a big family.
So what was it like then growing up in West Ireland?
Yeah, well, I had a great. I had a great childhood. I can't complain about that. It's, I say, live by the Atlantic Ocean. We've got a mountain behind us, like beautiful scenery. And it was the 80s. So football was all sports really, but football was I suppose like in Ireland we call it soccer because we had Gaelic football as well, but football over here, and that was it. And that consumed me massively. That was all I wanted to ever be and do. So yeah, growing up it was good. Although interestingly as well, when it comes from this point of view, is I like primary school. Primary school was good, but I absolutely generally hated school. After that, didn't like secondary school at all. Didn't like the way you had to learn. Didn't like the structure of it. Absolutely, it seems kind of odd, but I just hated school. And then when I went to uni, that suited me way better. So I don't know when I was like, it's kind of different to where I was growing up, but that's kind of funny with regards to learning about how you learn. That was one of the things, and I couldn't put my finger on it. I was thinking you were going to ask me a question like this, and I thought, what's the difference? And it's the same reason what I don't like in physiotherapy as well, which is like really stringent rules and hierarchy, and you must do this. But when you went to uni, and I went to England specifically first, it was like, you can do whatever you want. Here's the stuff. If you want to do it, you can do it. If you want to fail, you can fail. And I think my first test I did in uni for sports science I failed it. This is physiology, because I was this thing where there was no rules. There was no, you just kind of, here's the material. And I kind of just went on the piss for like whatever. And then it was like, oh, there's an exam. I failed it so badly because I had no idea. Like I'd literally done nothing. And then I was like, all right, this is awful. And it sounds obvious, but I just went, right, well, okay, I don't want this feeling again. So I'll learn it, and then really enjoyed that style of learning and writing essays and going away and researching. I way prefer that than your traditional exam-based stuff, which was always like, learn this, repeat this. And that's not for me at all,
It is interesting because particularly so many people who I've had these chats with, and certainly the last two, which was Gemma Parry and Uzo Ekiog, and they both said exactly the same thing. They were awful in school, really didn't go through a conventional way, didn't enjoy it. I would put myself in that category. And yeah, you don't like that format of this is what you do, exams. And yeah, I do think it's really interesting that a lot of people that have gone on to do really well, they actually didn't like that formal time in school.
Because I ended up doing 3 degrees, which is bizarre. Because it's kind of like coming from your traditional educational model. And in Ireland, it's different as well. You do 7 subjects for your equivalent of A levels. It's called the Leaving Cert. And you have to do 3 of them are languages. And so it's English, which is, I know it's not a language as such, but it's where, it's dealing with a language. Irish and French, you have to have a foreign language to get into uni. So there's 3 languages, which I'm not good at those things. That's not what I like doing. And then I had to do a science, which was biology. It was the only subject I really liked. And then the others like business and geography. It just was none of the subjects I liked. So unless you were that type of, and the world is biased towards certain learning, isn't it? Like it's the classic average, isn't it? You go to a shop and there's loads of mediums. There's very little XXL and very little XXS, but those people exist. And I just think like when it comes to even learning, like I was always told, reading, you're just not good at reading because you're not doing it enough. And like half my family are big readers and half my family aren't. And what I mean that is we love education, but if I start reading, I just fall asleep. Just get bored, have to read it again. I'm not dyslexic or anything like that. I can read, but I'm just like, it just bores me. I really physically cannot stand it. I can read scientific papers because it's kind of short and in little blocks, and I can get away with that, and that would be all right. But when it comes to like, absorbing information, and people go, oh yeah, I'm just really waiting to enjoy a book, I used to be like, what? I wish I could do that, until I heard audiobooks or podcasts. So when that came out in the late 2000s, once I heard them kind of things, I was like, I used to be around our dinner table because there's massive amount of family. We used to do impressions all the time. I used to grow up around the Harry Enfield era and stuff like that, and Steve Coogan and all that kind of crack. Like, so we would always be doing accents and voices and messing and all that kind of stuff. So, and actually, because I could do accents, so I had quite an audio, love music. So that was kind of like, now as soon as I started listening, I just devour audiobooks now, just like no problem, just stick it on and it just goes in there. So that was another thing about education, is like, it wasn't like that. And the norm is, if you can rabbit learn and read this and do this, you'll be good at school. And also, we talked about a hierarchy or being told what to do. It was very regimental. It was old school teaching, I'm the boss, do what I say. There was like teaching nowadays, I'm sure, is much, much better. Even my kids who are in primary school, you can see the way they teach, it's totally different. And it just wasn't fun at all. Like it was just, and not relevant. Like even maths and stuff like that. It's just like going, if you'd made this a bit more relevant, I would have buzzed here, but you don't. And you're telling me like I'm a spoiled little child at 15 years of age. And it's like, nah, I just don't want to listen. So I just didn't, just played football instead.
Well, that is what a load of people do, though, isn't it? Because it's like we had to choose between geography and history at third year, so at 14. But it's like my brother did a degree in history. Like my dad was a history teacher. My brother got an A, and so he was really into it. But it wasn't done in an interesting way. History is amazing,
Yeah.
and it's just like that. I mean, I don't know. Maybe you are immature then, but I think if it's done right, and even like maths, you could make maths more interesting. And yeah, the books that you read, some of them are interesting, like Animal Farm or whatever else you're doing.
Yeah. No, it's that, and that's it. But it brings into when as I say, I became a physio, and then when I did sports science. Then, as I said, we have something in common, obviously, with you being in Alsager and me being in Chester. So I really enjoyed lots of sports science, because the thing about it is in Ireland as well. So it kind of goes on. I'm kind of going back and forth here, but you go to school, you do those subjects, very regimental, and then in Ireland there was only, at the time, I think there was only 2 physio degrees, and they were like in Ireland it's 530 or 40 points, which is basically 5 A's and a B. So it's near medicine. Medicine's like 550, and this was 530, so it was really not far off. So like you have to do really well in exams to even get close to that. So lots of Irish people go to England because the points are a bit lower. It's a bit easier, but even still, I wouldn't have gotten near the points you would have needed because I just didn't go to school that much. I got by, I could do it, but it was pathetic. And it was interesting when I have to tip my cap off to my mum, because she just knew I had to get out of Ireland at the time. I needed a big family. Everyone knew who I was, kind of like as a family, you know what I mean? Oh, you're that person's brother or son or whatever. And I was claustrophobic by that. I just wanted to get away. And my mom was like, she could say it. She could mind read me. She sent me away for like 80 prospectuses from English universities. So the postman would be like, what the fuck? Where are you going? Like, and all I do is, to be honest, was to open up the prospectus and just look at nightlife. I was just like, right, where am I going to go? And interesting, I ended up in Chester, but it was close to Liverpool and Manchester. So that's kind of, and I had the points for it. I like the course.
The big picture of Rosie's.
Definitely. What it was is, I could say it was like half an hour from Cream. I thought, well, that's all right. I could get up the road there, and I couldn't get into. I think it was John Moore's was a bit too many points or something, so I had to go with Chester. So, but like even then, back then, like the physio was this higher, it was like, right, you must be this. It was very kind of, not, I wouldn't use the word hierarchy, but it was all like, it was very respected, and you have to get lots of points. You have to be very intelligent, or traditionally intelligent, inverted commas. And then, you know, kind of same things when I went from sports science into physio degree. And I love being a physio. I love doing what I'm doing, but I hated being a student. Oh my God. That was awful. And I was trying to put my finger on that because I love the sports science, but the physio really pissed me off. And it was like, again, it was the same thing. I was 21, 22 going into it. But when you'd go into placements, like some places wouldn't even let us sit with the physios. Literally, you know, this is our time. You sit over there like a child in another place and eat your lunch, and then come back and learn from us. And I remember just going, I'm 20. Like, I was the same age as some of the physios working there. Whatever about an age thing. I was just like, are you kidding me? It's like, and they made us wear this kind of ridiculous, like a Dr. Death, they used to call it, like proper, like sticking out like a sore thumb. Like, I have no idea what I'm doing, so would you please listen to me? Like, patients you had no hope with patients, like, you know. So we used to do that. And I hated it, and you just be treated like there's always this hierarchy, and this is the best, and this is where. You know, where this is the top of the chain. And the same thing goes with orthopedics as well. It's like the consultants at the top, and then we're the poor minions down the bottom. And physios get that. They're nearly like a bit afraid of who's above them, and there's certain hierarchy. I hate all that. So I talk to a surgeon just like I'll talk to anybody else. And I just try and break that down in any communication I do ever since. I've never wanted to talk like there's this kind of class or hierarchy. So yeah, it was interesting when I did physio, because I did like it, but as soon as I became qualified and went to London and started working, I was like, oh, I do like this job. But I remember telling one of my tutors, actually, at the time, I said I just hated being a student, and she was massively shocked by my honesty. But yeah, so that's just it's an interesting thing. I don't know whether other physios feel like that, but it was it's still there. It's still really rife, and there's and a lot of physios there who are really good. You know, it will stay under that kind of, you know, I don't know what's the word, not like they're being held down a little bit because they don't want to upset people, or we need to, you know, we don't want to speak out of turn, which kind of comes into communication, which I'm quite interested in, as well as how we speak to people and what type of language we use. And as you can see already, I do like to swear a bit, but at the right time. And the same with humor, at the right time can be the unlocking of patience, or the unlocking of learning, if you like.
Was there ever a point that you thought you might quit doing the physio?
Yeah, no, I'm not. I couldn't do that. Yeah, I think it's because I really loved it. I don't know where physio came from. Like, I used to, as I say, football was a big thing. My dad brought me on. I've always been interested in the body. I wasn't quite Chris Myers learning all the bones of the body. He's such a geek, but I did like the body. I kind of liked it in a different way. I liked so I was 12 or 13. Me and my dad went to this sports injury course that physio put on for 2 days, just learning about injuries and stuff. And I was just really fascinated by it. I didn't have any kind of like mad learning. I liked biology, I guess. So it came from there. So I've always, when I knew I wasn't going to be a footballer, I was like, when I did sports science, I was like, no, I definitely want to be involved with kind of helping people. I think that was the key thing, help, or sorting people out, like, you know, mentally or physically I think that's the real drive for me. So I never wanted to quit. No, definitely not. And even when I started working, I remember getting my first job in the Royal London. That's how I know Chris. And I came in halfway through the rotations, which was oncology. So it was pretty grim placement to start with, but I was delighted I had a job. So it was fine. And it was a couple of months, and you learn the ropes. It was a good place to start because it wasn't too complicated or intense. But I always knew I wanted to do MSK. It wasn't even a second. And as soon as I applied for physio, it was MSK. And this is where like a lot of physios will go, oh, you know, no disrespect to the other professions. Like going, I don't go to a mechanic, no disrespect, but I could never be a mechanic. It's literally totally different, you know. So when I went on the ward, I hated working on wards. I hated the whole idea of ward physio. That doesn't mean I don't think they do a good job or anything like that. Of course they do, and they love it. I hated it, couldn't stand it. And some of the best physios or soundest physios, I'd probably say, were actually on that kind of rotation, because MSK physios can be quite intense, you know. But I always knew I wanted to be MSK. So as soon as I could get into that, that's what I wanted to do. And once I got my first rotation as in MSK, I was like, yeah, no, definitely doing this. There's no doubt now.
So where did you study physio at?
It's a place called the Royal College of Surgeons in Dublin. So
Okay,
I went back to Ireland for that, which was an excellent course. In fairness, like, there was only 20 something on the course. We had our individual in each placement we went to, which is unusual. Only hearing this afterwards, I thought it was normal for courses, but we had an individual tutor for us as well as our own individual physios we worked with. So it was very well supported, and yeah, no, it was definitely an excellent course from that point of view. And it's a medical school, so we had full cadavers. So all our anatomy was learned on cadaver as well. So, and our exams were done on cadavers. So that was pretty cool. I'd kind of, it's probably wasted on us. And in some ways, I'd love to go back and do stuff like that again. When you're kind of looking at anatomy, it's really good. But yeah, it was an excellent uni. So yeah, and then I just went straight to London. I just wanted to get out of Ireland again. I wanted to get to a big teaching hospital and try and learn as much as possible, really.
And what was that like moving to London?
Class. I love London. Wanted to be. I'd been there before. I'd worked in London for a summer. My mum was interesting. She was born there to Irish parents, and then married my dad, who's Irish. So my mum was always, she's passed away now, but she had an Irish passport and very proud of being Irish. But she was born in Shepherd's Bush. So my uncle lived there. We used to go there as a kid, at holidays, and so I knew London. My brother was living there anyway at the time, so it was like, yeah, it's a great city. Love it. Not as much as Manchester, but I do love it. It's good.
Yeah, well, no, Westfield Shopping Centre, Shepherd's Bush, love it there.
Yeah, so I lived about lived about 10 minutes away. I did live near there for a while as well. Yeah. So, but yeah, London was straight away. It was good. The teaching was really like the where I was in especially in MSK, like, as you say, no Chris, Dylan Morris, he was there. Peter Malieras was there for a while. They had the university, the Queen Mary there, so the sports medicine department there. So they'd have like Hacken and Fredson he's a famous Swedish doctor who did a lot of stuff around tendinopathy, like just these kind of like world-renowned people and well-published physios. Where basically was like Dylan would have looked after my CPD and done in-service training with us, and they really drove. One thing I would have said about there is like, it was like the competition as well between us. There was a lot of good physios there. Like, I know a load of physios who worked in the Royal London or in that area of the Mile End, and they're all now doing good stuff. Like it was every level. You went from band 5 to band 6. It was competitive. A lot of people would go for the same job, and we were all kind of pushing each other to do post-grad stuff. Every 3 or 4 months, you had to do presentations after you end your rotation and present to the whole team, and and that's standing up in front of people. And only then, I suppose I teach a course now, and so many people hate talking in front of people, and it was just something I was happy to do, because I think I got it right from the beginning. I was never built up to be scary for me, and I'll thank the MSK team there for that, because they would make you do stuff you didn't want to do. And it was and they had great equipment as well. They had like stupid amount of stuff. So it was the best probably area you could do, because you just had exposure to so much, and great teachers as well, and everyone was motivated.
So was it lucky that you just ended up there then, or did you know that this had a good reputation?
Yeah. So I wanted it. So what I wanted to do is move to London, and in my last year you have to do like a, what do you call it? It's like a final placement, but it wasn't marked. You could do it anywhere you wanted. So like I was going to go to Chelsea Football Club, I think. That was just me coughing, by the way. So I was going to go to Chelsea because we had a connection with Chelsea Football Club. My sister, I can't remember, a friend of ours. And then my next door neighbour from Ireland, actually, he had worked in the Royal London. And when I was trying to get into physio, I'd spoken to him, and he was telling me about the Royal London, and he was still living there. I think, God, Jesus, this is a long time ago. And he said, I'll get you a rotation there. I'll speak to them, and you can do your final rotation there, which I ended up doing in neurosurgery. So that was like a 4-week rotation or 3 weeks. So I just went over to London and just did that. And then from there, so I'd worked there, so I knew what was going on. And then just applied for the job. And so I just knew it was a really good hospital, and I knew the people there, so it was great. It just worked out well that way.
Yeah, it is. I can't remember if that was the place where Chris said that they were in a department, and basically everyone who was in the department is now some of the foremost people in diagnostic ultrasounds. Was that there?
Yeah, I would have thought. I would have thought that Chris was there for a long time. Yeah, I would have thought that would be where he was. Yeah, because there was a serious quality there. You know, it was. You know, when you look at the names there that go there, it's impressive.
Stuart Wildman and some of the other people in there. So I don't know what it was.
I don't know them, but it could be unless I don't know where else Chris worked. Though. He got a Homerton maybe or something. But yeah. Anyway, I think London anyway is usually, you know, the physios there. It's just the competition goes high because there's so many. You're ambitious, you're young usually, and you just want to get somewhere. So it breeds that motivation. Like not everyone though. You still get lazy fuckers, but generally it was high quality there, you know.
So how long were you there for?
About 5 years. About 5 or 6 years, I can't remember, something like that. And then which was kind of a good move, is because I ended up, my wife's from Cornwall, that's how I ended up down here. So I did a year's up and down, and then I moved to Cornwall. I got a job down there just because I wanted to. We decided on Cornwall being the place. So, and that was probably in hindsight, like anything like this, you know, people, it just happens. It happens the way it is, and because it was less, there's so much less CPD, so much less of that kind of drive. It was definitely more laid back, I suppose, the best way of describing it. So I came with an intensity. I came down with an intensity that came across as a little bit. At times, if people were thinking I was aggressive, which I get accused of at times. I am massively passionate, which I think is, and I talk like this, so I'm quite, you know, I love to be relaxed and have a laugh. But if I want to do it right, so and I think people were kind of a bit like, what, this is what I'm used to in London, and they were like, what are you doing, like, you know? So they felt, and then since that, worked on that and tried to develop better communication around, you know, drive and motivation, like, oh, what are we doing here, like, how are we going to get better? That was all I was always interested in. How can we make the most out of this CPD? And I got in charge of a hip special interest group, and you know, 5 or 6 people would rock up to it. I was like, this is rubbish. Like 5 or 6 people, they're traveling the whole afternoon. I went, right, well, let's call it the sports medicine group. Let's invite loads of people around the county. Let's get better speakers in. Let's get people properly doing talks. There's free places to hold it. And I got 60 or 70 people rock up. People were traveling down from Devon, volunteering. People like contacted me for all sorts of, driving 3 hours to do this. And we just called it a conference and marketed it different. It was all free. It was all the same thing, but we wanted to get better talks and attract. And if you know, get a surgeon to come and talk to 6 physios, he's like, or she's like, really? They never come. They always used to bail. And I was like, going, because you're not feeding anything to them. If they're chatting to a room of 60, 70 people, it's going to be a bit more attractive, you know? And so that's what I was just trying to promote, that kind of, you know, you can do things for yourself if you really, you know, take these opportunities or just ask questions. So it made me become a little bit step out, because I suppose what London did a little bit was there was always somebody who was, I suppose, if you want to say it, better or more experienced or was really good. So you had these really, you know, qualified physios who were excellent in their field, and you kind of thought you were always like just there. Whereas, and that's something you need, that ability to kind of be able to make mistakes or do stuff and not be like told it's the right thing or have to ask somebody. You want to go out there and explore that a little bit, and that's what I did, and that helped me no end. That made me really come out, Michelle, learn more, find out how I was going to get my learning now that I wasn't in London. And that made me just dig around certain courses and really nail down my CPD. I think that it was a hip surgeon at the time. He's a good friend now. He stood up. He called a kind of conference between all the physios in the county, and I remember specifically, he just was like, you know, like, what are we going to do about these hips? You know, we need to get what about hip rehabilitation? How are we going to improve it? I remember standing up, and at the time I was like, we're just not very good at it. We're not doing it well enough. We don't, you know, the research is poor around it. We're not really testing patients hard enough, and you know, we should really be better at this. And that got actually, weirdly, a really bad response from the physios. A lot of physios didn't like me saying that, but he was absolutely buzzing with it, because he was like, right, well, what are we going to do about it? So then he says, come and sit in my clinics. So I was like, yeah, no problem. So I rocked up to his clinics most weeks, sat in with him, started chatting to him about it, had my ideas, how we could improve it. then saying how we could improve hip impingement protocols, and just started chatting. So this is the advice I always give to any physio who's looking to kind of know how am I going to get better. It's like going, you got to get off your arse and you got to kind of create opportunities. You got to go and find things and say things that you believe in, and then you got to work hard at that, you know. And that's what I did with him. And he was like, oh, I went to a conference there and heard this guy talk. It was James Moore, the hip specialist. And then I went, oh, I'm going to go on his course. Bang. And it wasn't, oh, am I going to get funding for the course and I better apply for the fund? I was like, no, I'm paying for the course. I bought the course and I got money back, but I didn't know that. So it's like, pay the course, that this is going to help me get to where I want to be at the time. So it's just that, like, I didn't know where that might be, but I thought, well, I've got someone who's showing me the ropes. I'm interested. Let's go after this. So I did that. And then I did James's course, and he opened my eyes into how rehab was poor and how to get better at that. So then I went on and really studied strength and conditioning. So I became a strength and conditioning coach as well. So that's where it kind of led to the next thing. I didn't really have any kind of major dream here. I just wanted to get better and better and better and just try and expand. And it just kind of snowballed from there, really.
So the S&C stuff, then, that came directly from speaking with James and seeing what he was doing?
Yeah, I suppose it was definitely influence. It was kind of always, I've lifted weights since, resistance training since I was 12 or 13. I was interested in boxing and strength sports and combat sports, stuff like that. I always liked that kind of stuff. Always worked out in the gym. Then I did sports science, which obviously, has the physiology side of things. And there was a big kind of influence on that. But then, but it was weird. This is why I set up the 2-day course, because it's kind of like I detached my brain from that and went into this physio side, which is basically because you're dealing with pain a lot. You kind of are always a bit risk averse about pushing patients, and strength training is, and then people are like, well, strength training isn't, is just as good as shockwave or any of the other kind of pain modifying tools you have out there. I'm like going, yeah, but it's not about pain. This is about other things. This is all about performance or function or even just a person likes strength training. So let's get them back doing it. So, but because of the way the rehab world is, you kind of, it pushing patients and using kind of resistance training as even a way of modifying pain, or people don't do it that much because they're afraid they're going to make it worse or the muscle's going to cause the problem. There's this weird, I don't know what the word is, but it's like they're still a bit scared of it. Not everyone, but I see that as a common trend. And it was like me, and I just thought, oh, how can I get better? And I remember on the course with James, and it was the first time I ever done this. I recorded it on my mobile phone, because I think it was the iPhone could do it at the time. So I recorded like a memo, So I just put it on my table. I didn't take notes because, again, I'm like the reading. If I write notes, I can't listen at the same time. So I'm scribbling down what he said, and I've missed the next 2 slides. So I just thought I'll record this and listen to it back later. And I did that. And geez, it was the best thing I ever did. It was really hard though. It took me about 6 weeks. I sat with earphones and I typed it all up. And I still have that as a manual. And it's still not much of it is, there's not been majorly huge changes in that. There's little tweaks, but it made me sit down and kind of go on like the intensities and why I'm picking an exercise and what's the benefit. What's the target of my exercise? Because in the past, it was just kind of generic. It would just be for, well, pain, strength, everything really. It's just, this is what I give. Whereas he made me think about that. And then I thought, well, I need to get better at understanding that system. So I loved reading about strength and conditioning. So I did loads of little local courses. There was a guy called Brendan Chaplin up in Leeds, and he'd put on some weekend stuff, and that was working with like top level GB strength and conditioning coaches. So I was getting exposed to really brilliant coaching and that world of coaching then, because that's the thing. I kind of say these guys are really good. When I say guys, I mean women as well, obviously. Like they were really good at communicating. It was nearly like I preferred those courses than physio courses. Physio courses come with an awful lot of ego. There's a kind of weird, creepy feeling in the rooms, and everyone's afraid of making a mistake. Whereas in the coaching and in the strength and conditioning stuff, they were all a bit more kind of like all right with that. Everyone was quite comfortable with feeling a bit stupid or not having it right. So I really like that. So those kind of things, and I just would read around that, and that just got me into thinking, well, you know what? Lots of people want to come to a physio to get back to performance and improve their sport or get back to sport. And I thought, well, if I'm a strength and conditioning coach and a physio, then I'll be able to kind of say, look, I can not only help you maybe rehab, but I can also maybe help you with performance, or use that as an opportunity from their injury. Look, you don't do strength training or you don't do power training. I'll teach you how to do that, and I'll teach you how you can do that here, and I've got the gear. And so from when they come in from day one in rehab, I've already turned this into, all right, yeah, he's going to teach me other stuff that I'd have to go and get a trainer for. And it helps them mentally kind of hopefully cope with it a little bit more, which is something, again, I would do on my courses. Like, how do you, strength training is fine, but how do you use it as a tool to help your patient both mentally as well as physically? And yeah, and that's how I ended up then going into my private practice, which is what I do now as well, half the week, you know.
So for this stuff then, so S&C, is that talked about when you're doing physio? Is that something that's mentioned on the degree, or like afterwards? How prevalent is it?
So the problem is now is when I did it, no, it was very minimal, and I think it was called the module was something like movement something. I can't remember what it was called, but it was really like it was a heavy manual therapy, a heavy electrotherapy modules. And there was like now I know it's different. I know there's unis changing this, and I know there's loads. So I definitely not going to, but it's still not brilliant, I don't think. I still think there's probably places, you know, I think there's just some, there's some kind of, what's the word? Some clutter to be taken out of some courses. There's definitely, but I know it's hard because speaking to lecturers about this, they're kind of going, well, what would you do? And some of them teach certain things and there's on a curriculum and it's embedded, and it's very difficult sometimes for them to change. So I do appreciate it's hard, but like the whole side of like coaching, not necessarily strength and condition, but just coaching, communication, I think that's hopefully getting better, but that definitely needs to be better than it was when I was there. And then this strength and just being able to use good basic principles of rehab. And I remember having a chat on another podcast, well, a debate, if you like. And I remember this particular physio was kind of saying, well, that's just our bread and butter. We do that. Now, he's from Canada, so I don't know if they do it differently there. But I was like going, it's not what I experience. And it's not what I experience day to day working in departments, but also working with physios when I'm teaching them on the course. They don't know the principles. They don't even, they may have, when you say, they might go, oh, yeah, I get that, but they're not applying it. Even progressive overload, where you're just making it harder each time. That's one of the worst things not worst, it's one of the things they don't do that much. So it's often physios will set an exercise, it's improving, and they just get people to continue. Or they don't apply the principles of overload or variability or anything like that to it. They just say, oh yeah, carry on. And that might be fine for someone's pain. So they might be like, yeah, I'm out of pain, happy days. But if it's got to do with something else, like a biomotor thing or a functional movement or a return to sport or a return to a job that requires a certain activity, and you've not tested them, and you've really not put their body under that stress, then I suppose in some ways, we don't know, but that's going to probably put them more at risk. And that's something that, you know, we need to really assess better, which is when you need to assess strength, you need to do it well. And that's the other thing. We don't do that well enough. And when it's important, it's very important. And I also, you don't have to assess everybody for strength, but the ones you do, it really makes a difference to how you prescribe and then how you can feed back to patients when they come back to you next time, you know. So it's a bit like imaging. You don't image everyone, but when you have to image somebody for the right reason, it really helps how you manage them. And I'd say the same thing for strength assessment. Don't know if that's kind of gone off on a tangent, but hopefully.
No. It's interesting. No, it is interesting because again, it's from the discussions that we've had previously. Then, yeah, it does seem to be the case, and that's why. Is that where the formulation of your course came from then?
Yeah, purely. Like it was weird. The story behind that is like I went to set up a private practice, and I did a lot of business, you know, like free funded government. I had to set up a private practice, which is the best thing I'd recommend anyone to do. I think a lot of physios set up private practice without understanding business first and marketing. They think people will come to you. By putting a lot of spiel on your website. And so I went there anyway. And it turns out part of that course was I had to do a 5-minute elevator pitch or whatever to 2 people to get some funding, which was going to fund my website. And the guy on the board is a 3-dan martial artist. And when I was pitching it, he's like, basically, I love this. Like when my pitch was basically, I want the angle was athletic performance and physio. It wasn't just physiotherapy. My old goal was to target people who wanted athletic goals or fat loss goals. And that's what we were going to target. But yes, you have an injury, but we're getting there instead. That's the idea, is to kind of use that. I'm going to make you a better athlete or get to your goal faster. This is in the way and I'll help you with that. And he was like, right, well, he ended up coming to see me. And then he was saying, like, he was telling me about the training they do. And he was like, going, are we doing this right? And I said, well, look, there's probably more efficient ways to get what you're looking for here. They just come in and just rag them, you know, as many presses as you can, as many sit-ups as you can, run up and down, very old school, traditional martial arty stuff. And I was saying, well, look, if you're trying to develop power or speed, like, this is maybe what you'd want to do. And he was like, oh, that sounds brilliant. Why don't you teach the club? And I just went, he said, would you come and we'll pay you and do a day learning? And I was like, yes, Dan. So I developed a thing. We recorded it like a day presentation and went through training. And then I kind of was weird. Like a month later, someone in our department, another department, rang up and said, oh, you know, do you know any S&C coaches who do a course for us? And I was like, I just went, well, I'll do it. And she was like, okay, cool. And then I didn't charge very much and just sat down and kind of redesigned it for physios. And then it was a one dayer. And then I did that for a while. And then the one day just got longer and longer. And I thought, right, I can't do from 8 till 6. So then I went 2 days and broke it down into, it's kind of really kind of expanded from what I originally thought I was doing to now kind of like behavior change, communication, and using this strength and conditioning to incorporate it into being a better physio, as opposed to trying to be a strength and conditioning coach, or trying to just, I think it's always, people see strength and conditioning and go sport, when actually it's my course is about saying this is for, you know, Fred and Etna who are 80 with knee replacements. It's applying the same principles and testing them and using them to create their life in a better way. And actually here's some of the evidence behind that, as well as 10-year-olds or whatever age or whatever athletic ability you have. And then how do we use the psychology to be able to get people, because adherence is one of our biggest problems, or commitment. You know, patients will say all this stuff, but actually committing to it is really difficult. And that's one of the, if you look at the research, it's really poor, especially after 6 weeks. And a lot of things like return to sport are a lot longer than 6 weeks. So I'm trying to, how do we get people to really commit to the thing so that they get what they want? So the psychology of that is really interests me. And I in the course is like, when we do practical stuff, people will go, okay, so why are you giving 5 reps? And I'll be like, it's not about just the physiology of the reps. It's also about the psychology of the person that you're finding it. So I might give you 5 reps, but the next patient 10 reps. And here's my exercise reasoning for that. And it's not just because the evidence says 5 reps is the best thing for strength. It might be, actually, look, I'm after quality here. And actually that person doesn't like 5 hard reps. They prefer 10 reps because the first few gives them confidence, and then they finish off the last few reps, because some people like bigger rep ranges or smaller rep ranges. So it's just knowing these kind of things, that the psychology builds in your exercise prescription, if you like, as opposed to just like, here's what the science says, right here, this is what you need to do. And it's very black and white, and patients, you know, as we know, are not like that. And that's my whole ethos, is how do we communicate better so that they get what they want, really.
So, and then in terms of the engagement and the demand for this course, then, so what do you see? Is it a growing market? Do you see there's a lot of interest in this? Yeah.
Well, like I've been flat out for about 8 years with it. You know, this year I did nearly one a month, and in some, like, the quiet months are August. Obviously, no one wants to do a course in August, and but generally, like, I did 2 or 3 in October. So there's definitely a thirst for that, and it's not just physios either. Chiros, I've had osteopath, I've had strength and conditioning coaches on there, a couple on there, and it's because it suits them as well, because it's not actually all about the strength and conditioning. It's about dealing, if they're dealing with rehab or communication, and it's I suppose it's a coaching course, and that's what I'm more and more interested in doing, and reading about, whether it's for fun or not. Like, that's the kind of books I like reading, and it's kind of, lost me train of thought there, really, but it's kind of, it's kind of grown out of this kind of people really confusing what strength and conditioning is, and there's some other great courses out there as well. I must say that, but there's no one really kind of, those courses that will be really good for certain things, but again, they can't comment on it from a physio point of view, because they're not a physio. And that's where I wanted to kind of go. As I've done those courses, I went on and they're brilliant. But if you're not into it, it can be quite hard to, how do I apply that to me as a physio with a 60-year-old who's just got lateral hip pain and doesn't want to exercise? Like, how do you apply that principle? I say, from what I do is like, you can. Here's the principle you would use though, or here's the reason why you would use just this. Whereas if you go on, say, the courses I went on, it would be like, all right, this is how you develop muscle strength. This is how you do this. And it's like, yeah, but how am I going to do that with that patient? That would be the question. And so that is always going to be a question for physios. And at the moment, people when they sign up to it are thirsty for it at the moment. Who knows? Next year it might fall out the window. But at the moment, it's popular, and popular is a crap word. It's people like it, and that's the other thing. I've always tried to like, I remember watching Louis Gifford. I don't know if you know who Louis Gifford is, but most physios listening would know who he is. He's very famous for writing his stuff on pain, written some great books. And he's from Cornwall, I think. Unfortunately, he passed away in his 50s, not too long ago. But when I came to Cornwall first, he did a talk, and he did a talk here for our NHS staff. And it was a Noel Gallagher Stone Roses moment, which was basically medical talks, and I don't really care who I offend here, are boring. They're generally very same structure. They've never really they've probably seen TED Talks, but they don't see why TED Talks work. And then they've just done the opposite of that. You know what I mean? And have you ever, like, when you go to my mate who works for a big brand, and he talks about their presentations, and it's like, wow, you're like, that's a presentation. You come away going, they know how to do it well. They know, sitting there with stats and evidence and loads of that. It's people, no matter how good it is, after 5 minutes, you're just like, oh my God, you're gonna kill me here. And you'll try your best for the first hour, you'll smash about 50 coffees, but effectively for 2 days, you're just trying to entertain people, and you're trying to make a couple of things stick with them, and so that they go away and they're actually motivated, not just like, well, that was just a bit like, oh, whatever, right? There's loads of information there. What am I going to do with it? Because I just think, I've been there where I've done these courses, and you're thinking, yeah, great. And then on the Monday, I'm just a bit like, feel a bit flat, really. Don't know what I want. Whereas when I saw Louis Gifford talk that time, and obviously he was world famous, but he came in and he was just super casual. He swore, which again, it's not for everyone, but I was pissing myself laughing. And he was just like, and everyone was, because who he was, he kind of got away with it to a degree from that, whether you get away with it or not. But I was like going, the Noel Gallagher Stone Roses moment is when Noel Gallagher saw Stone Roses. He was like, I can basically do this. This is cool. Like, these guys are good, and I want to do that. And when I went away, I'd love to do presentations like that, like something that makes me laugh, something that I go away with, and kind of. So I try and apply that to the course as well, just that people have fun for the 2 days. Like, it's not a laugh a minute. I'm not a comedian, but I do try and. I'm a bit of a comedian, Andy.
Oh yeah,
I can see you nodding along here, like, yeah.
You're kidding no one. You're not kidding anyone.
But you're just trying to induce my personality in that, which is to have a bit of a laugh and be a little bit like that, you know. So I don't know why
you do that though, because it's that is always it. Because sometimes I'm talking, I'm like, fucking hell, I'm boring. God, this is boring. Like, this is, and it's like, I don't think I'm a boring person, but sometimes I'm like, you're kind of looking at the audience, and you're just like, are they really bored here? I don't know.
Yeah, like that. Well, that's the thing, isn't it? That's the worry, is the fear of people. You got. I think it comes back to what I said at the very beginning. Like, I come from a very safe family. You know, I've got 7, 9, including my mom and dad, behind me. I think it's where confidence comes from. You know, if you're not afraid to fail, because worst case scenario, I've got my wife and my kids and my brothers and sisters who would do anything for me. And I know that for a fact. So it's just like, well, if that's the case, well, that's not the worst way in the world. If I fall flat on my face, I have that. If I don't have that, that makes me feel that would be, you have to be a different type of person, I think. I think fair play. I think really fair play. You must be driven by something else. But so I'm quite confident. I've always, from that point of view, is like, I always usually start to talk with that. Like, people won't like you. That's a fact. So you're going to have to go out into women, and people also don't like vanilla. And all of this comes from psychology books and self-help and really interested in what makes a good presentation. I'm a million miles off a good presentation. I always tweaking and always thinking, oh, that could be better. But you've got to go up there and thinking, well, like 1 in 5 people don't like you already. That's just the social statistic. And you just got to get over that and then just go with what I'll always say. The same with physios. You got to just trust what I'm authentic to myself. I like this. I think this is funny. Some people mightn't, but I don't give a fuck. And I'm just going to go with it. And like, if 2 people out of the 20 are like, this is the best course I've ever done, I'm signed with that. I think that's brilliant. I don't care. And if the other 18 are, well, he swore too much, or I didn't really like that slide, or he didn't say this. And I'm like I'm open from the beginning. I said, if you're here for 2 days, you might as well get something out of it. Don't sit there for 2 days being bitter about me. Just find something in the course that's going to at least help you. Maybe if you said, never do a presentation like mine again, that's helping you. And that's what I do now. If I watch presentations, like, I'll rob that. I like that. I really don't like that. I'm really bored here. Why am I bored here? Oh, it's because he's talking like this, or she's talking like that, or she's done that. And it's really disappointing when you see a presentation like that, because you're thinking, you've got a good point here, but you're delivering it in a really poor way. And I think when you say, like, how do you do that? It's trial and error. But there's a really good book. The book that helped for presentations was Talk Like TED. I think it was Talk Like TED. It's basically is an Italian guy's name, or not Italian, but it could Italian sounding, and it talks to you about the breakdown, of TED Talks, and just about what, and make it stick. I think is the other one. I think we talked about that as well. I think
we spoke about that one. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the other thing. It's just like, why do people remember stuff? And like, they remember, it's the same way marketing works, isn't it? Like, people put out stuff on media to wind people up, for them to talk about it and get into arguments. And then everyone's just talking about that person or that thing. Like, that's the oldest trick in the book. And it works. Every big brand does it. And every now, YouTuber or whatever does the same thing. Anyone with a big following will usually introduce some sort of discourse and then watch the comments just flow down. And then they get more following because there are people who are just talking about the same thing. That's just the way it works. So we know that, and no one talks about the boring slides. Like, you always, the amount of times I see people on Instagram, they'll put up a picture of them half naked, or saying something really controversial, and then they'll put up something really like scientific, really interesting, like the really good stuff. No one likes it. Nothing. And then if you're in your own, Adam Meekins did it. He put up himself in the underpants, and he's like 5 million, likes on him in his underpants. And he even was like, what is going on here? We know that some people have attention for certain things, and you might have the best message and the best morals, but no one's fucking listening if it's delivered in this really dull way. So how do you find out that? And some of it is a bit like, you're just going to have to be a bit risky with regards to, and the only way I say it's risky is, I'm authentic. I do swear all the time. I know when to say it, hopefully in the right time. Sometimes it's not in the right time. But when there's young kids around, I don't, that kind of thing. It's just timing, and the same with humor. And I guess a lot of the books I read are not just physio books. There's a lot of psychology, a lot of comedians. I love hearing about comedians. I love autobiographies from the point of view of, they give you that person's real, you get a full gist of it. Like, I learn an awful lot from autobiographies. It's not just about interest in them, it's just about them as a person. You're just like, wow, that's mad. Like, that psychology of how they've learned and what they've done. And everyone's that little bit different as well. It's not always the same, So, and then which are your favorite ones? Which autobiographies? Oh, geez, man, that's a good one. Yeah, which one comes to mind? Mike Tyson's one is amazing. And Mike Tyson's one is long, and that's amazing. I love Johnny Marr from the Smiths. That's a great book, but that's probably not really. It's a really good book, but Steve Coogan's one is good. But yeah, Mike Tyson, Andre Agassi's one is good.
That is good, isn't it? Have you done Shoe Dog? Phil Knight.
Oh, I didn't. No, I didn't. It always flashes up in my audiobook, but I've not gone with it. What's that like?
Very good. Yeah, love it. I've actually done that twice. I'd really recommend that one.
Yeah, I think, there's loads who like comedians wise. Yeah, Steve Coogan, Limmy from Scotland. I love him. There's quite a lot of comedians. Like, there's a guy in Ireland called Blind Boy. And I'm not want to go into, if you look him up, he was a musician, and I suppose you call him a comedian because he is funny, but he's very emotionally intelligent and talks an awful lot about mental health as well. Through, I would say it's kind of similar to when in my course I'm trying to do the same thing, not kind of being really not blasé about mental health, but really kind of bringing it to the fore by talking about it casually. And you know, he's quite good. And I listen to him talk sometimes when I'm just don't want anything too serious. And then I come away going, geez, that'd be really useful for certain patients, or even myself, just finding different ways than just your traditional way of learning about psychology or whatever. I like picking up things where I'm just letting it soak into my head. I'm not having to really actively listen or having to make notes or anything. But then I'm like, oh yeah, that's made me think about that. And that's the whole thing about dealing with people. Like, you know, as a physio, you're just constantly having to try and work on your own personality. And the amount of times that I don't know, maybe physios do think about it, but you have to prepare yourself like mentally before you see any patient. Like yesterday, I was saying before we came on, you know, coming up to Christmas now, wheels are coming off, really, really knackered now, you know. But these patients are been waiting a while, and and as an ESP, like they're sometimes like looking to make life-changing decisions, the surgery potentially and stuff like that. So yesterday I'm just like having to have a chat with myself, going, right, I need just for 10 minutes, try and just stay in the moment with these people, just really stay focused. You can easily just let it slip by. So you're all the things like body language, your empathy and everything will not be there if you're not conscious. Yeah, I have to kind of nearly say, right, just give it 10 minutes and try. And I always try and be interested in the person's story, because you get some people come in, they're anxious, they can be a bit rude or angry, and depending on their background, and that can really piss you off because you're like, well, I'm here to help you, and you're being a bit rude, like. So I'm often interested. I lean into that a bit more now. I'm like going, right, I want to know why that. I'm interested to know why this person's being rude to me. So I'm going to just ask an open question and let them go. And that's helped me an awful lot. And I'm interested in getting physios to be more and more conscious of that. Like I've had a text message before. Sometimes I see a patient and it's some bad news, or it's something that's going to put me off. And instead of kind of just dwelling on that, I kind of think, right, well, in order to take my mind off that, I have to explore this patient. So you nearly replace that negative feeling with actually the patient's problem. And I kind of end up forgetting about the other thing until after the appointment. So it's kind of worked out well as a mental health, practice, because it's a bit like sports psychology. I don't know if you did that at uni as well, but you know, like you come in, what they teach is you can't get rid of the negative thoughts. You've got to replace them with positive thoughts, and them negatives will come in, but as long as you keep focusing back on your breathing or whatever, you can forget about them or certainly reduce it. And that's what I try and do as a physio, because every patient, particularly in private practice, is a marketing tool for you. You know, they go away and tell their family, they tell their other people in the club, and I keep saying that on the course to physios. Like, if you own a private practice, the better job you do, that's, you know, you can spend all your money on fucking Google ads or whatever, but word of mouth, good quality local word of mouth will spread like wildfire. And that's, so you got to remember that before you go in there and maybe not give it everything to that patient. Don't know if there's a bit of a rant, but
Yeah, no. And so you mentioned about people. We talked about some of the books that you like to read. Are there any other ones that you think have made a difference to the way that you approach things?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, the three ones I love, and there's quite a few, but these definitely are the ones. Is the my number one is The Willpower Instinct by Kelly McGonigal. She's a Stanford University psychologist. She's written a few. I've read a few. The Science of Compassion. She's done one called Movement. But The Willpower Instinct is definitely just helped me understand why people, you know, what is willpower and then how it's harnessed. And it's perfect for commitment behavior and getting people to do. So that's definitely my number one. Second one is The Chimp Paradox. And again, all these are audiobooks because I wouldn't have read these. So The Chimp Paradox, that's again, like anything, and that kind of goes hand in hand with Thinking Fast, Thinking Slow, which is Daniel Kahneman's book. And both are excellent. The reason I like The Chimp is because people relate to it immediately. It's a simple model. I don't know. Have you heard of it or read it?
Yeah, Steve Peters, isn't it? Because the thing is,
yeah.
what you were just talking about before, about how, when you got something in your mind, if you wake up at 3 a.m., which I do regularly, it is like, it's never a good thought. Never a good one.
It's not Santa Claus is coming anyway, that's for sure. No, absolutely. He talks about it because Steve Peters, that's the one that always, the interview with Chris Hoy, he's another, he really impressed me actually in an interview. He was quite down to earth guy. But he was talking about, he said to Chris Hoy, what's going to happen? What are you going to think because Chris Hoy was a bit unsure about psychology and stuff, he says in an interview, and he met with Steve Peters, and Peters went, look, you got the World Championships coming up. What happens if the rider, a couple of riders before you breaks the world record, or the rider before you breaks the world record? What are you going to do? And Hoy said, oh, I'm not going to think about it. And he's like going, well, if I say to you, don't think about a pink elephant, it's like, it's kind of impossible not to think about one. It's just there. You can't just not think about it. It's there. And that will create a certain, right now and here and now, it's not going to be a problem. But he then told him, if I say, well, the next time you feel that you're nervous or you're a bit anxiety, you've got a bit of anxiety between now and your World Championships, just go through your race prep. That's what you're going to do. So Hoy said it, he was like, all right, well, he gave it the old classic thing that people do respond to psychology, like, yeah, right, okay. And patients do this all the time as well. And so he went home, he said, and he saw, I think it was a French rider. Hopefully I've got the story right. He went, the French rider did a really good time in training. You can see their training times. And Hoy just went, yeah, like it didn't make him stressed, but he was like, ooh, right. So it made him kind of feel a little bit like that. So he then went, right, well, he went through his 2.5 minute race. So what he was to do, what kind of things he had to hit, all that kind of stuff. And he kept doing that. He'd have him, I think he even said like a row with his missus, or something to be a bit stressed at work, or in training, and he'd go through his race prep. And then the World Championships, he said 3 riders before him broke the world record. Then the second guy broke the world record again, and then a third record. So like literally 3 world records, I think it was. And then Hoy broke the world record. But he was saying, as soon as it happened, he just went into like you would do if you go to the gym and you train for 3 months, and then you lift that weight. Your body is used to it now, but you didn't just go in and just lift that weight straight away. And that's the whole idea of that chin paradox. It's just that mental training, being able to just like, how can I deal with this? And no matter how much I've read this and listened to this, it's so hard to practice. And sometimes you're brilliant at it. Like he says, you get really fit and you're thinking, why don't I do this all the fucking time? I remember listening, I got the app, Headspace, and I'd do that for 10 minutes every day. And I was like, oh, I feel brilliant. I'm definitely doing it. Paid for the bloody year membership, never listened to it again. And you're just like, why do you do this to yourself? It's just mental. And so I'm always interested in, and the beauty about it is you can always go back in the gym, and you can always go back in the gym for 5 minutes. So just go in there, and I just, like, even me talking to you, I find it quite cathartic doing these kind of conversations. And my mum passed away from lung cancer, and I mention her in every course I do. It's part of empathy and stuff. And every time it does catch me. Even now it catches me again, but it makes her feel like she's living on, kind of way. This is a way of dealing with grief. So every time, it's not easy, but it makes me feel good at the same time that I'm mentioning her, that she's, I mentioned her today again, because she was a big part of my life and how I am. So it's just ways of how you manage your mental health. And I just think the chin paradox model just makes it simple, and people can always relate to that. Why do I do that one time? And then I'm really, like, here now in your physio department clinic, I'm really kind of, yeah, I get it. And then Tuesday night, I don't give a shit about nothing. And all I want to do is eat pizza and drink wine, and or I get really stressed, or I can't sleep in the night, because it's not there all the time. And that kind of follows on from the willpower. It's like, why have you got willpower 1 minute, and then another minute you don't have it? You just think, where's that gone? So those 2 books just opened my mind to, you have control over it. And then and the more you read the psychology, self-development, and autobiographies, you see the same traits in how people manage their mindset. It's that's what they're doing. It's nothing else. It's not talent or any of that. I've read all those talent books. Talent Isn't Everything, Talent Code, Bounce. There's loads of them, all saying the same thing. And then that's the last one I'd recommend, is Mindset by Carol Dweck. She's also, it's just literally mindset. She's world, like, super famous educational psychologist, Stanford again. And that's a belter for anything. Especially young kids as well, as it's all about developing growth mindset. She's the one who came up with fixed and growth mindset model. It's also inspired loads of other psychologists and other books off that. But that one, that is another belter. All those 3, really, if you get your head right, you can really help patients. But also, to be able to help patients, I think you got to help yourself. You've got to be able to become tools to be able to deal with stresses of how you work, and then rejection, or people not liking your stuff, or bombing at a conference when no one really laughed at any of the jokes you put up. And you know, and you just gotta find ways of how to manage that. And those three definitely, they're game changers there.
Yeah, no, I'll check those ones out. I mean, it is interesting, isn't it? With mindset, you like you say, you can. I have literally it can change within a day. I'm like, oh God, this is amazing. Then it's like, look, what am I doing? Why am I doing this? So it's
Yeah.
it is funny, and it's I don't think there's any way. This is a slightly controversial book. Well, it is now, but the time well, even then it was. So it's called Think Big and Kick Ass in Business and Life. Who do
Oh
you
yeah.
think? Who do you think might have who do you think might have written that?
Think ass and what was it? Kick ass.
Think Big and Kick Ass. Very
Oh,
famous American.
yeah, it's not Tony Robbins. He's a bit more less than that.
A little bit less popular than him.
Donald Trump.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But honestly, I like I think it was
Yeah, but
written
like,
about '05. It's absolutely brilliant in terms of like resilience, momentum, mindset, and like if I was having like, and I've used it for a while now, a couple of other people who run businesses, and it's like there's some stinking stuff. Like one of the chapters is called "I Love You, Sign This" about prenups. But there's some really good stuff that's just like actually
yeah.
that really resonates, and it's good about resilience. So, you know, he's gone down on my estimations over the last few years, but the
But
book's
like,
great.
that's how that's how he became president. Like it doesn't surprise. Like the success is whatever you want to think someone's a bell end or not. You know, there's so many people like that in every walks of life, whether they're him or not. Like we all have them. You're thinking what? And stuff, you know, these people who go on TV programs and live reality lives and, you know, do all that. And I'm like going, what is that existence? But it's like going, that's for them and that's what they like doing. And they could, you know, happy days, that's grand. So he the other day, well, he did that thing. We were talking about it earlier on about creating discourse between the left and right or good and bad or moral and less moral or whatever. He does that. He's the king of that. He put out like that absolutely awful video of selling his, you know, his business NFTs. You see that? It's absolutely awful. He's not even. He's obviously read it for the first time when he's done it, and it's like, you know, the first prize is a dinner with me. Not that that's amazing, but it's a prize. It's all we've got. You know, he's not even selling it too much, and the cards are ridiculous. He's beaming lights out of his eyes. He's sitting on an elephant, like it's fucking. It's like comically bad. And they're $99. I can't believe they're so cheap because they're going to be gone and they're so rare. And he's just creating this nearly like caricature. It's just bizarre. No one in their right mind would do it. 4.5 million he made from that one day. Bosh. They sold out. Now, people you could imagine who were like, oh, they're all his followers. And they're going, no, there's probably people there going, oh, these will be worth something. This will be, you know, they'll be working it out. And he's just going, I've read that after I got off the toilet, because I know, well, no matter what he says, everyone's going to be, that was spread across all, it was viral, his absolutely comical, and he doesn't mind being a clown because
No.
he doesn't care no more. And that's interesting when I read about this kind of is psychopathy. If you've ever read books on psychopathy, there's a book by Ken Dutton called The Science of, I think it's The Science of Psychopathy, I can't remember the name of it. There's a psychopathy scale, and you can fill it out. You can do the questionnaire. You never do the questionnaire with anyone you love, by the way. There's a couple of random questions in there, and so you have to do this privately yourself, and you have to be very honest with it, because he's done a load of research on different professions. I won't mention certain professions on here because it could get me in trouble, but it mentions it in the book. One of them, which is nothing to do with medicine, but there is a medical one on there. Some form of medical professionals score quite high on the psychopathy scale, which just means they're not psychopaths as such. They're not going to kill people, the traditional idea of killing. But a lot of people who are successful, I'm sure, and people know this, is that they're quite psychopathic or sociopaths, or they very kind of selfish, I suppose, is one word you can look at it. It's not if they make choices for themselves and that's where they get to, you know, again, you can't really argue with that in a way. And if that's what they want to do. But one of them that scored high was priests. Right. And it was like, well, he said he interviewed one, and he said, I think it must have been Catholic priest, because I can't see the benefit of being a Catholic priest, but Protestant priest, at least you have a house, you get a parochial house, you can have kids and family, and you get a car, and it's a job. And this priest said to him, and this could be controversial if people are religious, but this preacher said, well, I don't really believe in God, I'm just really good at it. This is what he said to this in this private interview. It's all what you call it, confidential. And this is what he was saying. And I was like going, yeah, I get that. Like, just goes up, tell stories, at the weekend, I get a car and I get a house and I just have a normal family. And I like to maybe, he might like living a clean life or whatever and be quite moral in his life. And that's all he wanted to do. So it's kind of funny with this, people's impressions of what's good or bad. But down the line, then it's the same with religions. They all have quite similar principles. Like, don't be a prick, be nice to people, look after people, don't rob people, don't kill them.
Yeah.
You look at that, across the board, they're generally the rules of religion. You know what I mean? Be sound, don't be a dick. And if you do that, and if the same with being successful, if you do that, if you're consistent, if you show up, there's going to be very similar principles to any kind of book that along those lines. Whether you're a dick or not is another matter.
So what qualities do you look, say if you're recruiting someone or when you're interviewing, what do you look for? What do you, in an interview, like what are the things that you're picking up on?
That's a good question now, because you know what, that's a really hard one for the NHS, because the NHS is points based. It's awful. And I don't like it at all, because you have to answer questions. A lot of the questions, often the ones that we have to ask, are very medical. It's like, here's the question, and it's either this is the pathology and this is what you do, or this is the action you take. Some of them are a little bit more open, but generally you have to kind of mark them for so many points that they've got. So it takes away, I heard this about 10 years ago on a podcast. A private physio on a podcast said, he's really interested because within private practice, you don't, like, for example, like you recruiting would be much better because you're just going to find out if this person's going to work well with this team. So I would always, like, this guy said, if you come from a family business as well, which I actually do as well. It was interesting. He said a couple of things is if they come from a family business, talk about like what you asked me, where do I come from? What gets them going? He says, a lot of people like that will have that kind of inherent kind of like, I was working with my dad since the age of 10, I like to go and do jobs. We was contract cleaners, so we would always work. And I have that kind of early drive in me. And I don't know if it's because of that or not, but you just have that. I don't know where you come from. And I've heard that before from other people who have self-employed parents. So I think that's a nice little clue to just see people they know the value of money. It just doesn't rock. Your parents who've got like jobs, who've got, like, employed jobs, there's no kind of like getting up at 5 in the morning, like they go between 9 and 5 and then it's there. Or like I saw my mum and dad, doing the accounts and having to go and get gear and getting up at 5:30 in the morning, 5 o'clock in the morning, coming back at night, then going on a Sunday. Like, you could blatantly see there was a business being run or how things would have to be changed around. And that would make you see the value of money a little bit, I guess. I don't know if this is a great point, but I just think that little clues like that. But even if they didn't have that, I'm big into personality, just kind of like, what are they into outside of work? What kind of music you interested in? And look, if they say like Lionel Richie, I'm not going to massively, get upset. But if they say something like Take That and all that, I'd be interested in why they like that and where they come from. That just what as them as a person. It's no sports they like. Just want to connect with them, just like I actually want to do with a patient. I've always want to explore them and then find out a little bit more of them, because technical stuff, like even being a physio to a degree, like if they got to the degree, you can kind of teach that stuff later. You can't teach being a sound person. I don't think you can teach that. If someone's just a bit of a dick, you can't undo that. Do you know what I mean? But if they're like, definitely. If they don't know how to assess a shoulder, you can say, look, you need to go on a shoulder course, or here's some shoulder training. It's technical. You can learn that. But if I see somebody who's shown ingenuity, he's kind of like, I think like you mentioned, I won't mention who it is, but you were saying you got somebody in to work with you guys, but they volunteered, they wanted to be there, and then you took them on. I mean, that's someone who's like, I'm going to show you I can do this. That kind of stuff is, I think that's gold dust. That kind of get up off your arse, showing. If I could interview that's what I'd be looking for. What have you done to try and really push it? What's your plan? Not necessarily like what's your dream or anything, but just like, how would you see, how are you going to say you're going to get better at doing what you're doing? I'd be interested to know what kind of strategies you have around that, because so many people, when I've asked that, what's your CPD plan for the year? It's just like, well, and it's interesting. They just say random stuff. They've no real idea where they kind of want to be. And I'm not looking for 5 years or a millionaire or anything. I'm just looking for what are you doing right now? Because if you're not doing anything right now in this next few weeks or months to kind of get, I can tell you now exactly what I'm doing for my health, physical, mental, work, and private work. I've got a list every single day. 3 things get done, always. And that's so if anyone asks, because again, it's just those little things day by day. If you look at goal research, you just start moving closer and closer. And then random stuff like I meet you at Therapy Expo. Like that again was a massive random chance. But again, I'd done stuff in the day, little things that ended up me meeting you.
That opening slide.
Well, that probably helped. That probably helped. But it was like, but that opening slide was the biggest talking point for a lot of people and other people that we know who introduced me to you. You know, all of that was kind of, that wasn't, things had to be done in that day. Those little, you know, pressures are like, right, you know, I must make an effort here. Just do this, spend some time with these people, have a good conversation here, and then enjoy that. And really, it's not, you know, living in the now, but it is living in the now. Each conversation, it's not like, what can I get out of this? Because everyone I spoke to there, I really had a genuinely good conversation. I was lucky when I went to that expo because I really met some really sound, and people were all interested in moving towards a common goal. It wasn't like, what can I get from you? It was more like, geez, we're saying the same stuff here. How could we work together more? Like that kind of relationships is what I'm really interested. But that only comes from little bits, and I just don't think people do those little bits. You know, just that little thing. Well, today I've done a few things today. I know I'm like going, I can imagine just not doing that now. And that's just, and it's a small little thing, but that little thing could just have done that little thing. So I'm always in that. We were talking about it before we started, isn't it? You don't really switch off, do you? You know, we're saying about Christmas being a good time because maybe the phone calls are less, but I'll be still thinking of stuff. I'm in the shower and I'm like, I've put on my phone, got little folders and notes. They're just little things that would be interesting in a talk. Or maybe I could say that, or maybe I'll do this, or maybe I'll conversate. And sometimes that doesn't happen. But a lot of the times there's things in there that I'm like, it goes in the back of the head and it stays there, and then it comes out at the right time. And that's what you hear when you hear, again, autobiographies, people who are successful talking on podcasts. It's the same thing, just little bit constantly all the time, being consistent.
Yeah, consistency. And I think, again, you mentioned luck, and again, a lot of the people I've chatted to on here, Uzo, who was the previous one, was talking about, oh yeah, so many people, pretty much, I'd say 90% say I've been really lucky. And you just think, well, you're putting yourself out there. The quote Gary Player one, the harder I work, the luckier I get. I think that is brilliant, and it's a skill, isn't it? It's you were saying there, or I should do it, and you know you will do it. You just think, but you still do it because that is just you. It's what your parents have done. My parents still work much harder than I do, and it is ingrained in you, really.
And you get well, again, it's probably behind that is you get a buzz off it. You get like, you know, I love conversations like this. I love doing the stuff I do. I like going, like, there's times where it's a bit stressful and I get, you know, not every day is brilliant by any stretch of the imagination. I wake up most mornings, to be honest, I'm an awful person in the morning. I wake up pretty much quite low every morning, pretty much. Like, you know, it's one of those kind of really random things to admit sometimes, but like for really, really in the shower, I'm just not interested in this day, no matter how much it is. Even going on holidays to a certain degree, I'm like, yeah, I'm just like half an hour, 45 minutes in, I'm grand every day. Bizarre. And I say it on my course a lot. And one woman came up to me afterwards, can't remember what age she was. She was definitely over 50. And she just went, I'm really glad you said that because I feel like that every morning. And then it goes away. And loads of people kind of feel like you're a bit depressed. I'm like, definitely not depressed. Absolutely not. But it's these kind of things that you just have to, you learn about your own mind, and you just have to kind of think, well, how am I going to, what's going to keep me, what's going to make me buzz in a week's time, and constantly doing that. And like for the last week now, I've really been, the wheels come off, so I've looked at a lot more football and, you know, really easy, you know, comedy and stuff like that. And I know when I need to look at stuff like that, then I'm like going, right, I'm definitely done now. I don't want to listen to a podcast. I don't want to listen to a book. I want to just listen to someone to make me laugh. And that's what I'm pretty good at. I think that's managing my stress levels with speaking to my brothers. I'm really lucky there. I've got really 3 good brothers and 4 great sisters that anytime I want, I could speak to any of them. And afterwards, I'll always either laugh or come away feeling much, much better. And it comes from a basis of trust as well, which just allows you to be able to get that out. So I've got these little strategies that help just go get you through consistency in the day. I think they're the other things you need. You need to build in ways of being sound to yourself or compassionate. Don't like the word compassionate, it makes me sound like a hippie, but it is just saying, you know what, no, now's the time to switch off, versus do I keep the pedal on the whole time? And it's getting that balance. And you definitely will know that, and sometimes you get it wrong. But when you get it right, and then that feeling afterwards when like we met, I had a really good time, and hopefully things will, progress with different things. And the same with guys from Rehab Guru, I met them, same thing as well. Just nice guys sound. It's good feeling about that when you meet people like that. And I think that's why I do the work for, because I love that kind of, I like meeting people and developing them relationships. It's good feeling.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. Yeah, you want to be involved with good people doing good stuff. You mentioned that earlier on. You want to push things forward, and I think that's important. Just to pick you up, I think that Messi was named after Lionel Richie, though, so you shouldn't diss him.
Yeah, but I'm a Maradona fan. Maradona's the best ever.
Yeah, so forget Messi then. Yeah,
yeah. So I'm not really too bothered about him. I've always been a Maradona fan. So even when I was really happy. I like Argentina. Argentina is one of my favorite countries I've ever been to. They're a mad culture. I love it. But yeah, no, Maradona all day long.
Yeah,
I wanted to call my son Diego, but my missus wouldn't let me. She said it would sound a bit daft. But
he's called Armando, isn't he?
Yeah, that's his middle name. Yeah. Or Andrew. See, Andrew's not too far off that. You see. Convinced myself for a long time. I used to tell my mom I was either Brazilian or Argentinian when I was a kid. I was adopted. She was like, yeah, whatever.
So just a question on football then. So so growing up in Ireland in the 90s, like what were your impressions? That was a bit of a golden era for Irish football, wasn't it? With all those English players.
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah. We don't go down that route now. You know what I mean? We could get very political very quickly here. And like we had some of the best players in the world. Roy Keane was the best. One of the best midfielders by far in the world. So yeah, 88 was when I remember. I was saying to my son, he's 8 now, and I was like, this is when I remember the last. Like I didn't remember 86. I was 6 in 86, so 8 and 88. But Ireland got the Euros, the first time they ever qualified.
You beat England, didn't you?
Beat England in Stuttgart. Yeah, Ray Houghton. Yeah, so we like Ray Houghton, Ronnie Whelan, Frank Stapleton, Kevin Sheed, like all these players played for Liverpool, Stephen Staunton, Liverpool, or like all league first division teams at the time. And then 1990, we drew with England again, drew with 1-1. You won, you got to the semis and cried when you didn't win again. Yeah, that was that. They were brilliant. 94, we beat Italy in the first round as well. That was in the Giant Stadium, which is like Ireland, New York, like Ireland, Italy, in New York, which is amazing as well. Yeah, football was back then. That was amazing, actually. So crap now, unfortunately. It's just we hope they pick it up. But like at the end of the day, we're the best team in the world at rugby. We're number one in the world at rugby, which is ridiculous for less than 4 million people. And we got a lot of competitive sports in Ireland, like Gaelic football and hurling, which is the local sport, like the national sports. Like they're super popular, and so that takes at school, that's what you play one of those sports. So like you can imagine that takes an awful lot. So we're a sport hungry country, like it's pretty impressive, for the size of us,
No, it is. Well, I think 2002, I think that was a real shame when Keane went home, because I felt you genuinely had a chance to go very, very far in that tournament.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I was pro Keane though. I was massively pro Keane time. I couldn't. I'm a United fan as well. So since I was in the 80s, being a United fan, and in Ireland, everyone laughs like, oh yeah, because you're Irish. But like at the end of the day, like, we built your roads and everything over in this country, so we get to pick your teams as well. That's an important point. But like United. I didn't like. I like the standards. Again, that's that kind of standing up to bollocks. Like we're the fans who come over and sing and have a good time. I remember him saying that Keno. He said, "We're here to fucking compete, not just show up." I feel a bit like that about anything in life, really. I'm a bit like that. Sometimes a bit like, this is a bit mediocre. Like, we're here, let's make a good one. Like, if we're going to have this, let's do it right. Or so when he said all that, I was gutted that he didn't even play, but I was like, on the same time, that's why he got respect. And I think, still you love him. Everyone loves him on TV, don't they?
Oh no, he's great. He's class. Great player, and he's interesting. And he's a really good character. But I know I've kept you long enough here, so thank you very much for your time and insights.
No, it's good crack.
Looking forward to working with you. Well, this is going to go out in next year, so this year. Look forward to working with you this year.
Yes, this year.
Smooth.
God,
smooth.
So smooth. Nice one. Cheers, bud.
Top man. Cheers. Have a good one.
See you.